I'm not sure of those exact numbers. We'd need to come back to you with those.
Thank you very much for those answers. Moving to Councillor Arbery. Thank you. You have a question as well? Councillor Hughes, thank you.
Yes, a couple of things. One is the signage is going to be really, really important, getting that really clear and really big so that it seems, because it's very, very difficult to currently know how to get around to go behind balance because it's not very clear. So I think if we can work together on that, both on the road and visually above, that's really clear so cyclists can take that option, because I think they would take it a lot more often. The other thing I wanted to talk about is down the other end of Totara Street and finishing the cycleway so that it goes around the back of Coronation Park. It had been considered that this was out of the bounds of this because of cost. Is that correct?
Through the Chair, Councillor Hughes, at the moment, in terms of the brief we received, it was scoped to go to Coronation Park as an initial step, was looking at how Innovative Streets plays out and how those connections might form. It's not off the table and will be considered as part of the delivery of the wider cycling network. But at the moment, that is correct, it is out of scope in terms of this current project.
So, supplementary through the Chair, if I can. It would just seem like we would want to finish, if we're going to do something, we would want to end it where people want to end, and the opportunity to actually have a completed cycle path that actually lands us down into the Mount when we have funding available in the cycle action plan for this kind of thing. What's the opportunity to changing the scope slightly so that we could look at completing that to the end?
So we're waiting on the Accessible Streets project to define exactly what they want to do. Once we know what that is, we can then look at the connection and how do we join the two up, because we're effectively almost coming to the same point. Coronation Park just sits between. So I think once we've got their plans and they know what they want to do, we can definitely look at how do we do that connection so that the two join up as a seamless cycle facility.
Thank you.
Just a supplementary to that, Brendan. The Innovating Streets team and your wider team are working in concert with each other on this, I presume?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Excellent. Councillor Hollis.
Yeah, just a question about the heavy vehicles. We've got the chart that shows east side versus west side. Typically those drivers are professional drivers, so would be more typically alert. On the east side are a number of retail stores as well as parking lots for businesses. Is there a number for non-heavy vehicles for both sides? Is there a comparison for that?
Through the Chair, we don't have precise numbers in terms of the usage of the retail precinct. They are, in terms of its usage, we know that there's approximately 5 car parks available for each of the retail businesses, and that would cumulatively be around 30 to 40 car parks. The frequency at which they enter and exit customers is not known.
So the reason is because the heavy vehicle turns into the port and into the other side was used as a reason for the path to be on the eastern side and not the port side. And I just want to make sure that the data is full, that we've got a complete data set to make the right decision on this. If it can be on the port side, I suspect we will remove some of the risks of cyclists ignoring the cycle path to do the most direct route.
Even if we ignored the turning movements, we cannot go down the east side because of the KiwiRail points there. So that is just a side that we can't use.
So just to clarify that, I know it's in the report, but to Councillor Hollis's question, KiwiRail have said that you can't cross at the turnaround point.
Correct.
That- Yeah.
Yep.
And
So, on the eastern
on
alignment.
the east, on the western.
Western, sorry,
On the western side,
side,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that came through very clearly. Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Just picking up on that one point before I ask my other question, that is at a grade crossing, though. That's not, if we went like an overpass over the rail, wouldn't have the same problem, would it?
Correct. We could try and go over or under, but the practicalities of that and the length you need to get the ramps to get up and over would make going over pretty much unfeasible, just with driveways, etc.
Same is true if we did it from east to west, or is that a more practical opportunity for an overpass down at Hull Road, across where the railway line is, basically?
We'd still have the same issues trying to actually fit it in between driveways and to go over. It's easier to go at grade.
In paragraph 32, Brendan, just the initial cost, 6.98, so like 7 million. Now that if we approve to go to further, final design and so on, and we look at the real costs, how confident are you with that original estimate not sort of going much higher?
Through the chair, there's been some additional work not anticipated in the original scope. We're going to have to look at how the hedge along the port side, north of Kawaka, replant that and remove some of the dead hedging. There's some additional relocation of services required, and therefore we're firming up those cost estimates. So that particular cost estimate was based on a set scope, and that has changed. And we'll look to bring that back to you on the 27th of October.
Yeah, so the PSOC committee will be formally asking you to approve that funding aspect. So that will be a separate decision.
And just one final question, just at the intersection with Hewlett's and Totra, doing it across to the east side, if at some point the TSP investigations show the grade separation of that intersection is essential, it's probably hard to ask, but will we be able to look at potentially then having a connection for cyclists through that grade separated intersection that can link to the east side and make that one less point of a delay for both motorists and cyclists?
The TSP will look at, over the next few years, all options for Totoro, and that's looking at moving product from trucks onto rail, and that may look at extending the capacity of the railway network as well. So nothing's off the table, and a holistic solution will be sought and all the options considered and no doubt presented to councillors for consideration.
One of the advantages of TSP is it clearly identifies what modes are priority on which corridors. So Totra Street does show as a key cycle network, so any scheme that is developed in the future will have to consider that as part of the design process.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kitty.
Thank you very much for all the work you've done here, because it's a pretty raw subject at the moment. I well understand that. I myself, 4 other councillors, someone from the Cycle Network, a business owner and a commuter cyclist, all spent a couple of hours down there a month ago, I think it was. So I suppose, as we all know, what they were expressing was that they're not going to change behaviour. Some of them are just going to carry on because that is the quickest way. Time is of the essence. Some of the businesses were concerned that they hadn't actually had the opportunity to have a conversation about this, so they would really like some more engagement through this period of time, because their concerns, and I'll reiterate that by a cycle that Steve and I had down there where Steve nearly got hit by a nice big Ford Ranger. Very, very scary time for Councillor Morris. So I suppose, there's going to have to be a massive education goes on with those businesses, with the car parks, with the customers that they have there as well, So my question to you is, are we planning to re-engage with those businesses and with the commuter cyclists as well as the recreational cyclists who are also very concerned? My main concern is that we're putting a plaster on a problem that really needs immediate attention, and the best solution may not be the plaster.
Through the Chair, we have been engaging with the retail precinct. It's been very promising. We've got some of the landlords wanting to upgrade the businesses' frontage. We've got some of the businesses wanting additional bike racks, and there's some businesses that certainly have some challenges in terms of some operational issues. So we absolutely engaging with each of those businesses that have been directly affected by the proposal and continue to do so. In relation to the question about education for both commuter cycles as well as those less confident, we'll certainly, and we do have a forum through Bike Tauranga that looks at a balance of both those more confident people as well as less confident people, and trying to find the best sweet spot we possibly can within the constraints that we have.
Just a couple of things in relation to your question about how quickly do people adapt. Based on experience down in Christchurch, where we've done a similar street to this, it's the uptake and the learnings for people coming and going from properties is incredibly quick. The markings are done in a way that, as a driver, it's clearly obvious that something is different to what's been there previously. We also have signs as you come out of any car park saying look both ways. So to date we haven't had, I'm now shifted, they haven't had any issues with commercial premises and these two-way cycleways going past, which is why we're confident this will work. It does need some education, and there will be an education campaign around cyclists and how they use these facilities, because they are new. So our Travel Safe team will do that as part of a wider training suite that they're bringing in. So yeah, we're definitely conscious that you can't just install it and assume that everyone knows what they're doing. It does need some education.
Brendan, thank you. It's great to have your experience, you and Dave, from other environments, particularly large metros like Christchurch. I think this is invaluable. I just want to, apropos Councillor Kitty's question on engagement. I understand that the engagement has been exhaustive. Is that correct? I mean, I take it what you said, Karen, that you have talked with every business along that stretch of Tautara Street. I understand they've had more than one conversation though, and that their issues have been highlighted, they've been examined, and I think we just need to get the facts out here on engagement, because if I understand Councillor Kitty, she's suggesting there's been a lack of it. But if I understand it correctly, it's actually been extensive. Is that correct?
That is correct. Particularly with those businesses directly affected, we've had direct change in the design as a result of that engagement. And I personally think it's been a real positive outcome that we've got businesses so supportive and wanting to work with us around change.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to hand over to Nick, if I think he can add to this.
Yeah, I'm just thinking there might be a timing issue there as well, because it was a few months since you went down on your bikes, and we've obviously done a lot of consultation and engagement since that time, but it would actually be good to know who that was we hadn't consulted with at that time, just to make sure that nothing has fallen in a gap. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, and thank you for the report on the engagement with Tautara Street businesses and users. I think that's phenomenal. But in terms of the wider community, I don't think we've mentioned to them nor sought their feedback on a delay on the state highway. Is that correct? Potential delay as a result of this going through and being constructed. Have we engaged the wider Tauranga community about the delay on Hewlett's Road?
Through the Chair, no. What we have taken into account is the overwhelming feedback not supporting the crossing north of Hewlett's, and the preferred option by many was to have a signal crossing at signalising the slip lane. The extent of the impacts of the queue of an additional 250 or 500 metres has not been consulted on.
Councillor Robson.
its mic up and running. A couple of questions, if I may, and a couple of requests somewhere along the line. Funding from NZTA very much is driven by, as I understand it, the commuting side. So they fund cycling as a transport mode rather than recreation, which is why NZTA don't, sponsor pump tracks and off-road cycling events and whatever else. Where are we sitting with that, given that we seem to be driving towards the recreational cyclist on that? Is there any risk with regard to NZTA, or there's sufficient commuting cyclists in the project to make sure there's no risk there? I'm just checking.
Yes, Councillor Robson, we're progressing really well. That's been addressed through the business case process, and equally, not all commuter cycles are necessarily confident cycles. So we're looking at the numbers. Our cycle model is showing the predicted future use, and that is certainly being part of the economics, current economics, and the business case proposal.
If I have a couple, if you may, you wish to, this is quite a complex topic. On the western route up Tocha Street, cyclists already, of course, cross the railway line, both of them on cycles. The reality is that what we're talking about is if we take the western route straight up, it crosses where Kiwi Rail don't want us to cross. But if that route diverted slightly onto where we currently cross that line, and cycles currently cross that line, that would be acceptable to Kiwi Rail? You see the point I'm making here? If we go up the western side, if we go straight across where we have the move in of the tracks, Kiwi Rail say you can't do that, but to the east, slightly to the east, cyclists actually cross on that western side already. There is a marked cycle lane effectively there. They cross there, but it's on the roadway. So we could come up the western side and simply, if we want to, is that a possibility? Has that possibility been looked at?
It certainly has. We are really limited with road space in terms of it is a pinch point, and I think it's important to note that the shoulders and the on-road lanes are being maintained for people that are more confident cycling. To try and rearrange the space without a major upgrade is a significant challenge in terms of the road width that is available.
Okay, I'll make a request for some information later. Or perhaps now, just, is it possible when this comes back to PSOC to have the following information available? And that is, could we have the outputs of the model, particularly the cycling model, with the origin destination data of where people are coming from and where they're going to, and the numbers? That I think would help convince some people that we're investing for an appropriate return, if that's possible, because we haven't got them yet. So origin destination data for the various types of cyclists, if we can do it over time, that would be great. In terms of the BCR, could we get the key criteria and the key economic outputs out of that? Do we include, for instance, one councillor has already made reference to time delays and the cost of time. Could we identify what the big numbers are, both sides of that BCR, and what's driving those numbers? Another one, obviously, which is important to someone like myself, is the CO2 emissions of stopping traffic when you've got 19,000 vehicles stopping on a regular basis. It's an argument, obviously, for grade separation for rail, but if we could have those numbers, so if we could get the OD data and the BCR data for the PSOC meeting, if that's possible.
We can definitely get those.
And finally, the cost of that western route deviation, if we could have that in, just so, it's part of the BCR calculation, obviously, that if we went that route, this is what it would cost to create that pinch point, noting that we've done that in so many places in the city. We've taken the routes away from that. That would be helpful as well. And also I do have reservations about the lack of wider engagement. This is turning potentially into a Greeton situation. We're a small group in a narrow geographic area, and we're not looking at the wider system impacts. We know where that got us with Greeton. the reputational damage was significant. And one of the reasons it was significant is at that point, staff withheld key information from this council, which I believe would have influenced the decision. So I'm just asking to make sure that when we get to PSOC, all the information is available. I don't want to be in a situation of putting in a late request. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely make that available.
I'm just wondering, just challenging that just in terms of the costings for the detour around on the western end by the turntable. If it is a fatal flaw, is it worth us spending time and money on the costings, or is it?
The clarification, cyclists crossing the railway line of the fatal flaw, cyclists crossing where a direct linear non-deviated path is a fatal flaw. But at the moment, cyclists cross the railway line quite legitimately with no complaints from people rail. It just so happens they cross it a couple of metres.
Yeah, so what I was meaning was that if there isn't enough road space to deviate at all, then
The reports that show that are available for presenting at the PSOC.
sure, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. Any other questions, councillors? Jaco, did you want to speak to the substantive motion?
Well, I'm happy to second and defer for Heidi to move. I know Totara's been her baby.
Right.
Happy to move. Thanks. Happy to move. Yes, I would. I'm on Bike Tauranga as a committee member, and our motto is to get more people on bikes more often. And there was a lot of conversation, heated debate around the table there between the fast bikers, who are the strong and fearless ones, and around the rest of the table for the people who are interested in the people who are not currently on bikes and why they're not on bikes, and getting more people out and about. And I'm one of those ones. I'm not exactly a confident cyclist. I ride along Hewlett's Road. Half the time I ride up on the footpath, which is equally as dangerous as riding with the buses. But if I have the opportunity to ride in a safe and separated environment, I will cross the road happily down Totara Street twice, along with quite a lot of people that currently don't ride down that street. I currently don't ride down that street. And I think we've got to keep aware that this is one of the most complex streets in the country. This is the entrance to a major port. So we can't expect to get everything right on this street. We are going to have to compromise. But because it is also the most direct route, we want the opportunity for people to ride safely down that street, and that's what we're providing. So overwhelmingly, Bike Tauranga supports this. They support this because it creates a safe and separated opportunity for our community to have a choice to ride to the Mount. That's all I'm going to say. So I commend this project.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Jaco.
I think what we have here is quite a complex situation, but we've put in place quite a good process to manage our way through that. So we've got a team with a lot of firepower in the Haerenga Tahi team, and they've got their internal challenge and review team as well. So we're going to end up with this interim solution, not being able to tick all the boxes, but being able to tick the most boxes for the most people. It also has the support of NZTA, and I think for the time being, this concept design, we should support it and let them get on with their work.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak to the substantive motion? Councillor Cloud, followed by Councillor Robson. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be supporting the motion, albeit just on the, I guess, concern that there is this 20% figure that we've been given that will stay on the road. And I'm not sure how we're going to validate that. I assume we're going to have traffic count or counters, are we, somewhere along the line? And if that's the case, then I'm very keen to see what the actual usage of the cycle lane is, the cycleway is. I certainly applaud the fact that it is a very safe method of traversing Totara Street, And so I expect there will be an uptake in usage, particularly of the of commuters, but also of recreational cyclists. So although it's not perfect, and I do have this concern about crossing Totara Street twice, will be supporting it and looking forward to the more fuller information coming back through to PSOC. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I'm in agreement with the statement made by the seconder that we've got a process and we need to work through it, and I think the process is a good one, and I commend the efforts of the staff to try and untangle this Gordian knot. That being said, my concerns are with the consultation. My experience talking to members of Bike Tauranga and others, it is not overwhelmingly supported by them. There is actually an active and ongoing discussion in this space and social media between members of Bike Tauranga. I also note that the councillor who's moved the motion has said that she's a member of a committee of Bike Tauranga, and the councillor herself has raised issues around other councillors having conflicts, and I just urge pause and caution when people go into that space. I do hear an argument from staff that the less confident cyclists will prioritise safety over directness, but the arguments being put is the less confident cyclists want the most direct route. You can't have it both ways. If people are prepared to prioritise safety over directness, then we need to think about whether Totara Street is in fact the right path for the vast majority of people apparently who will be using this. We'll find out when the modelling data throws out. As I say, I come back to the process I think is good. There is the issue around the perverse consequences and the fact we're not consulting with the vast majority of people who will be affected by this decision. We should have learned from the past. We need to make sure we consult with the vast majority who are impacted. I note on Ngātai Road the uncommented on perverse consequences. We now have an enormous amount of parking on berms inside the cycleway where it's taken away the on-street parking. There are now, if one cares to look, a significant increase in berm parking, people parking on the lawns outside their fences between, with the attendant, risks and damages that incorporates. So it's a really difficult situation. I appreciate the effort the staff have put in. Some of the arguments I'm hearing are in contradiction. Some of the positions being taken, I believe, are driven as much by ideology as evidence. I look forward to everything coming back to the PSOC meeting where hopefully we'll up the level of information and can make a really well-informed decision. I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. I do support the majority of the proposal, and I look at the resolutions before us. It talks about us endorsing the preliminary design in Appendix B, and certainly from Rata Street all the way down to Hewlett's Road, I do support and endorse the work that's been done to get us to that place. I think that is great. The consultation with the not with the residents, with the business owners and the cycling community and those that use Totara Street has been exemplary. What I do have issue with is signalising the slip lane because there is an alternative, and that is going past the back of Balance. And whilst I do acknowledge that normally the most direct cycle route is the best one, I do note that there has been comment publicly that we may be perhaps willing to compromise on the Wairoa River issue, the Omokoroa to Tauranga cycleway, instead of going the most direct route there, taking our cyclists on a bit of a magical mystery tour to get into Tauranga. And so I do believe we need to be consistent and even-handed with our residents. And so if we're going to allow that because of the objection of a neighbour, I think that we should be open to having a slightly longer route through back behind the back of Balance and up to Totara Street that way. Because what does concern me is the impact on our motorists. And if I look at the ABLI data, this is between 2009 and 2015, the average daily traffic on Hewletts Road heading east in 2009 was 9,000 vehicles per day, 9,800 vehicles. That's over a 7-day average. By 2015, that had grown to 24,000, and of course it's 5 years after that now, so one could only imagine what the volume of traffic is on that road. And just looking at the Hewletts Road, Tortora Street intersection, this is again years out of date, 2016, we're looking at 300,000 vehicle movements through that intersection. And so I am going to move an amendment once I get my mind to it, because we need to be aware of the impact of this decision on the wider traffic network and on the state highway. It is unacceptable in my view that we delay our residents trying to get home cumulatively by many, many life hours, life days perhaps, per day trying to get home in order to do this when there is another alternative, and that's through Tortora Street. And I do note Councillor Robson's observation around Greerton, which I do support. You know, we needed to have a better look at the wider network and the impacts. And of course, Tenby Powell also made the same comments about Greerton as well, that council should have consulted better with its community and listened to its community around the wider impacts on the network. So to that end, I do support resolutions A, B and C, but with an amendment which would read in B, that we endorse the preliminary design as attached in Appendix B, but with the amendment with option 3 as the preferred option. So I do move that. Otherwise, unfortunately, I may not be able to support the substantive because I think we're not considering the impact on motorists. Is there a second?
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Can I get a second for Councillor Kitty? Thank you. Do you want to speak to this now?
No, I think I've
Councillor
exhausted
Kitty?
it.
Thank you, Councillor Arbery.
I think we shouldn't constrain the process at the start of the process. I think we should let the team work through those options and put forward a preferred option.
You, Councillor Bullock.
Yeah, I think when Councillor Morris talks about going down the back of balance, he's failing to say that it goes down the front of Wharoa Marae, which is just one more of those things that is a problem with trying to solve this problem. So I don't support the amendment. I think I agree with the seconder, Councillor Arbery, that we should go ahead with this process. If there could be a resolution to that, because it isn't an easy one, everybody around this table should know that, then that can come alongside it. But to pause it now, I think, is just going to back up the truck too much. So just speaking on the amendment only, that I won't support that.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, also on the amendment, won't be supporting it. To cross that would mean that all of the cyclists have to cross Hewletts Road, which is a hell of a long journey to cross by foot across that road, which might have to mean that the light sequences have to be changed anyway to support the number of cyclists that will start using that street. So I would imagine that might cancel it out if we had to do it that way. So I'd just like to see the process take place and go with the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Robson.
I'm in agreement with Councillor Hughes on this. I think one would hope, and that was going back to my request for can we get all the evidence on the table for the PSOC meeting, one would hope that the assessment of the point that Councillor Hughes has made, the traffic impact of actually putting everyone across all the lanes of Hewletts as opposed to a slip lane, was part of the calculation for why this was preferred. But if the evidence can be given to us, it's really important that when we get reports, and I've been a frequent, how can I put it, highlighter of shortcomings occasionally, without malice, of reports that come to us where key information or key alternative investigation results haven't come to us, and it doesn't help. So as long as we get the information coming to us, we're fine, and I don't need to support this amendment. We can continue with the process, as Councillor Arbery originally argued. So I won't be supporting the amendment.
Thank you. Just speaking with the Chair, I won't be supporting the amendment either. I think there's a couple of things to bear in mind here. First and foremost, we have the privilege of having a very highly skilled and professionally experienced team, and I think we should take their advice and keep things moving. Secondly, this is, at the end of the day, a temporary measure. And while it may be temporary for some years ahead of the TSP's work, it does what we want it to do, in my mind, which is deconflict cyclists with heavy transport. It is not ideal, and I think Councillor Hughes captured it really well. I'm pretty sure, Heidi, you said this is one of the most complicated roads in the country because it is the main entrance to our major port. As a consequence of that, the truck movements are very significant, but it is better, as incomplete as it is much better than having another cyclist killed or injured on Totara Street, which would be, from my perspective, entirely unacceptable. And I'm very grateful to the team for having worked so quickly on this in the circumstances. But I do remind you, councillors, that this is, at the end of the day, a long-term temporary measure. It's not the complete, the TSP will get to that in times to come. So I also will not be supporting the amendment. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to that? Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think on inspection of the resolutions, it does say that we're endorsing the preliminary design in Appendix B, and that is endorsing the signalised crossing of the slip lane, and I'm not prepared to do that at this stage with the absence of evidence around the Hewletts Road crossing. So when it does come back to PSOC, I think it would be a useful piece of evidence to have if we had the crossing from Totara Street, if I can call it south, across Hewletts Road to Totara Street north, and if that was perhaps phased in with the existing signalling there, where the entire Totara Street is actually blocked off while, the entirety of Hewletts Road is blocked off while Totara Street is coming out onto Hewletts Road. So if we phased the opening of a cycle path across there and pedestrian path across there with the existing traffic lights, where the entirety of Hewletts Road is blocked off because Totara Street traffic is coming out and turning right, I think that's possibly what members are not considering. You don't just press the button and stop all of Hewletts Road. The crossing is actually phased with when Hewletts Road is blocked, so perhaps members aren't considering that. So if we can include that coming back in the report to PSOC, I would be most grateful. I would anticipate that there would be 0 minutes delay on Hewletts Road as a result of that. So that might be something members may wish to consider at that time. But unfortunately, I cannot, as it seems that this is going to fail, I cannot endorse the preliminary design as attached in Appendix B. I do support from Rata Street all the way down to Totara Street, but I think, as was the case with Greerton, we are failing to consider the wider transportation network, and I am sure that the people around this table that absolutely slated Greerton, and I remember some very emboldened and passionate speeches about Greerton and slating our poor Tauranga City Council staff and councillors, mayor of the day, would also consider their words at that time when community feedback comes back from frustrated motorists who are being delayed trying to get home, thousands of motorists being delayed trying to get home on Hewletts Road. When that feedback comes to this table, I'm sure that mayor and councillors would listen to it very, very carefully and show due respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. In that case, councillors, I'll put the amendment to you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Can I see a show of hands, please? So 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against?
Aye. No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think, which means there's no abstentions. The amendment is lost, which takes us back to the substantive motion. And before I go into that, Councillor Hughes, we have had some advice from Democracy Services that you may potentially be conflicted. with your
Yeah.
role on Waitara. So it's your choice, of course, in these cases, as raised by Councillor Robson. However, if you wanted to stand down as the mover, I'm happy to move this.
Sure.
In this case.
Yeah, I'm happy to stand down.
All right, thank you. I think that would be
Point
expedient
of order, Your
circumstances.
Worship, does that apply to the previous vote for the amendment? Because we did vote on an amendment.
Yes, well, that's a good point. It wouldn't change the outcome, but I'm happy to take that again if Councillor Hughes would like to stand down from that vote, which is what you're suggesting. Would you like that to happen, Councillor Morris?
Yeah, I'm happy to have that happen. It doesn't change the outcome, so if you want to be pedantic,
We can
no
redo the
worries.
vote, or we can just take Councillor Hughes out of the vote. Right, as an abstention. Great, thank you very much. Councillor Baldock.
If I can speak to the main motion. Look, we don't normally spend $7 million on a temporary solution. I think most people would think we were pretty crazy, but this is a very complex problem and does need some attention. I agree with some of the comments made about how hard the team are working and how we benefit from having a good team to try and solve it, but it's almost an unsolvable problem, and which is why we turned it down some years ago with a figure that wasn't too far away from where we're starting to head. I hope the final, I don't use final solution, had I? It's not going to work well. But if we are going to see Totara Street as the shortest distance between 2 points as a cycle route through to Mount Maunganui and to that very popular place, I do hope that we have a better design than what we're looking at now, ultimately, because I can't see this one working too well. That doesn't mean I'm voting against it, but I just raise the issue here that we're trying to make something work that is almost impossible to work in that environment. It is the biggest port in the country, it is a state highway there, and there is what may become a state highway even down Totara Street at some point. I do raise the point about overpasses though and overbridges. We have some in the city, and there is one at Barks Corner, there is one on State Highway 36 at the crossing, and they work very well, and they provide safety for people to get across on both pedestrian and cycles. And in many ways, I think, I don't care what it costs, that's the only way to go, because they are a good solution. And sometimes when we're told that you can't fit them in and so on, that may just require a bit of creative working or a bit of purchasing of some other land to make them work. But there's no point building something and then not doing something that really makes it work for the sake of another $1 million or $2 million, and then in 5 years' time looking around still not seeing cyclists going down the road that we hope they might, which I see too often in the city. And I see over the years I've been around too many of our sort of cycle paths not being sufficient. The one thing I've learned over the years, and particularly with the trip to Christchurch, that if we're going to do this, we've got to do it properly, they've got to be off-road, they've got to be safe, and they've got to work. So I'm still going to support it going to further design, because we do have this short term, and the short term is like 10 years. But we've got this problem until we get the TSP working through some really big issues for our city that are very expensive ones too. As a resident, I'll conclude with this, as a resident who goes through Gretton frequently, I've never complained about what we did there, except that the pedestrian crossing should have been an overpass, quite frankly, or an underpass, because that's what actually holds up the traffic more than anything else, basically. And we saw the other day, and just in one of our briefings, the growth of traffic of 25% since 2016. All of that traffic's going through Gretton, and that's why we still have people complaining about it. And it'll get fixed when the TNL gets done and we get a connection for 15th Ave. It will be at least alleviated a bit, because people can get to the lakes by not going through Gretton. But I'll support this, and we'll look forward to it coming back to PSOC, and with some other very good questions that have been raised today for further information, we'll make a decision then. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Robson.
Request, Your Worship, because obviously I've already spoken to the substantive motion. Could we take the motion in parts, please? The 3 parts, A, B and C, could they be taken in
We can do that,
parts.
if that's your wish.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to the substantive motion? Speaking to it now as the mover, a couple of things spring to mind here immediately. One is I often find myself sitting here wondering if there isn't a disconnection between strategy and tactics on a range of things, and this is one of them. The strategy that we're looking at for the city is to get people out of private cars and onto public transport, which includes alternative forms such as cycling, and we're going to talk about Lime scooters here today. And yet, then we have a huge tactical debate on something like Totara Street, which is, as we discussed, hugely, I'm not going to repeat all this, but hugely complex. And I guess where I'm at with this today is I worry that it's a conversation fundamentally on the complexity of a construction job and the cost. The cost of the job itself at $7 million, the cost of time at 1.7 minutes, which is, if my maths is correct, around 100 seconds or thereabouts, for delaying motorists against the cost of a human life. And we've already had one fatality on Totara Street. So I find myself confused between the strategy of getting ourselves into alternative forms of transport around a city which is very clogged up, and a city we know which has its geographical challenges or topographical challenges, and the tactics that come with that. So while I'm absolutely going to support this, I think what it brings for me, it highlights it brings into stark relief, really, or sharp relief, the role that the TSP is going to play ultimately going forward. This is a the whole Totara, Hull, Hewlett's complexity is going to be very, very challenging. And I think this is just another small part of that jigsaw puzzle that will occupy some very good minds. And again, I just wanted to finish by saying thank you to this team for the work that you've done. It has been very good indeed. I don't agree with the lack of engagement that's been mentioned here today, because I know what you have done. And I thank you for doing it, and doing it again and again in a couple of cases with the local business owners on that street. I do accept and take the point that more information should come to the PSOC, and I think Councillor Robson's comment on the Greerton work, the roundabout, that isn't there anymore, I think is very valid. And we do want to be careful and ensure that we are looking more widely rather than just those that live around, in this case, Totara Street. But the substantive motion certainly has my support. In which case I will put that to you, Council. All those in favour, please say aye. Sorry. Pardon in parts. Thank you very much, Robin. Which is A, that we receive the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, and no abstentions carried.
Abstention, I guess.
Yes, Heidi, thank you. You will need to be. Thank you very much. And I'll take your abstention for A, B and C. Council, Part B endorses the preliminary design as attached in Appendix B. All those in favour, please say aye. Can I see a show of hands, please? So, can you see that, woman? Deputy Mayor Salisbury, Clout, Arbery, Baldock and Powell. And an abstention from Councillor Hughes. All those against, let's see a show of hands. So Hollis, Granger, Morris, and Kitty. And we have an abstention from Councillor Robson as well, which, if my maths correct, is carried by the skin of its teeth. Is it? Right, thank you. That's carried. That's B. So C, supports the project proceeding, etc. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? And abstentions other than Councillor Hughes? And that is carried. Thank you very much, Council. At this stage, I'm going to call for a break. We have a technical issue, and the live stream's not working as well as it can do. So I think now is a timely point to have a break. We're nearly at the 2-hour point anyway. So, Raj, I don't know how long you and the team need for that, but can I suggest 15 minutes at this point to give you adequate time to, which would take us to, 25 minutes to 12 would be great. So 11:35 return. Thank you, councillors.